introduce myself. My name is Clare. My background is I'm a GP and a medical herbalist. I trained in UCD long before all of the students were even a twinkle in their parents' or probably grandparents' eyes. I then practiced as a GP, and excuse the noise in the background, I can't do anything about it. I then did a degree in herbal medicine in the Middlesex University in London. And you might ask why. And the reason then is as valid today as it was then, that I found a lot of my patients with things like circulation problems, irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, sinuses. I had no answer for them in my medical school bag. And some of the other things that I had an answer to, I kind of thought, no, I'm not sure I'd take these myself, okay? Because I'm not going to die of the illness. And all drugs are toxic. They're designed to be toxic. They're designed to overcome the body's resilient ways of keeping out poisons and then to do things to suppress our biochemistry. That's the design. There's no conspiracy theory. That's just the way it is. I questioned, I describe myself as curious, analytical, scientific, but a lot of my patients for a lot of those conditions were still feeling miserable. When they would come for their pill check, I'd ask them about how's their irritable bowel, and they'd say just the same. You know, I'd have given them everything in the cupboard. They know I've done my best, but they still feel miserable. They still got the sinusitis every November, and then they would get an antibiotic, which I now realize, and everybody now realizes, did no good. And for people with chronic hay fever, they were miserable every summer. You know? So I was like, there must be something out there. Surely it is not beyond the wit of our resilience and resourcefulness over the years to have solved some of these problems. And I was a keen gardener, so there you go. There I was digging in my garden, getting rid of all the useful herbs like the nettles and the dandelion. And I just had an inkling. This was long before everybody was putting herbs in their washing up liquid, right, and their bath salts. This was when herbs were, everybody was sure I was talking about homeopathy. Yeah. Big difference between herbal medicine and homeopathy. Herbal medicine has more in common with pharmacy. And homeopathy medicine is an energetic medicine. So they're very, very different things, both to be respected. All medicine over the thousands of years that we've existed on the planet has always been heterogeneous. I love words. So, and I'm talking to people who are also curious about words, I hope. So medicine has always been heterogeneous. It's only in the last 150 years that it has become monochrome monopoly. Right, so which is very unusual in the history of the planet. I'm taking a wider brief today because this is part of a university Earth Sustainability Week. And I'm sure all of the students know that they should go to bed at a regular time, that they should avoid too much alcohol, that they shouldn't drink too much coffee, that they should do their preparation. I mean, you all know that. I'm not going to bore the pants off you again. So I'm going to talk about sustaining ourselves. One thing that I like about all the world religions and all faiths, and what I like about herbal medicine is that it speaks to the metaphysical, the things that we can't quite explain, the big questions, as well as the physiology and the biochemistry. So all of those big thinking ways of trying for us to be in tune with our questioning minds and the earth. They all say, to thine own self be true. And all of them are about living as best we can within our physical manifestation, each of us unique and individual. So one of the things about herbal medicine is that it treats each person as a unique individual. It's not so powerful that it smacks down like a sledgehammer equally in every patient. The herbal medicine is complex, the individual is complex, and they cross over. And I like that. You know, pharmacists hate it by learning. They learn that it doesn't fit in with their model. They don't hate it, but it annoys them because it doesn't fit in with the pharmacy model. So I'll come back to that. So sustaining ourselves, we all know, and we all wish it for the rest of the planet. Is water, food, Food means shopping, growing, the good life. At the very least, shopping and shopping, shopping as sustainably as possible. And there's all different levels. We do the best that we can. Connecting. Every time we eat, we connect with the land. Every time we shop for food, we're eating a harvest. We're eating the produce. So very important. I have found it very difficult to learn to eat without distraction, but I now consider it to be a courtesy. It's kind to me, so it's more sustainable for me, but it's a courtesy to those who have done the work. And if anything COVID has taught us, to appreciate the people who drive the lorries, serve in the shops, put themselves in the front place. So it's about connection. And of course, sleep. Sleep is mysterious. It's the arms of Morpheus. It's anesthetic in a world filled with fears and dangers. How extraordinary that we go unconscious every night. We still don't know why we do it. There are so many mysteries. So I like the fact that herbs are ensconced in all those mysteries. And herbs can certainly help us to sleep if we're having difficulty. I'll come back to another way of expressing all of that was described in one of the first universities, and certainly one of the foundational medical schools in Salerno in the 13th century. So picture this. Learned professors, and they included women. Salerno actually had a very heterogeneous, love that word, it's obviously my word for today, student group. It was before women were excluded by the medical profession. And there are very learned women in the history of medicine, not just in nursing, but to their great credit in nursing. Why are people getting better in COVID? We don't have magic drugs, do we? We have nursing staff. So all the people who are in hospital, they're getting better because of nursing. These three professors in a courtyard drinking their wine over a healthy Mediterranean diet lunch, and they're going, what do people really need? What do they really, really, really need? And they came up with the three foundational things for our health: Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, and Dr. Laughter. That's it, guys. If you get those in balance in your life, you're done. But we live in a very, very artificially constructed reality in the 21st century. We have light 24 hours a day. They didn't have that then. We have supermarkets. They didn't have supermarkets. They had to walk or grow or, put effort into getting their food. So I've added two more for 21st century living, and that's Dr. Sleep and Dr. Movement. Okay, so you have 5 doctors. We need 5 doctors now. And that's because globally, 56% of the population is living in cities. And herbal medicine is part of the renewal and regeneration that part of herbal medicine could be to address that. So I'm going to talk about some plants, right, that I use every day, all day in my clinic. My clinic is down in Sea Road, across from the Jazz, across from Ernie's. You all know where it is, near it's the cool end of town, it's the West End. And that's all you need to know. Find your way down there on another day. Can you hear me with that noise in the background? Yeah, okay. So here's the plants: nettles, dandelion, ribwort. You all know ribwort. Check it out on Google. Plantago, it's called. Elderflower comes into before the white thorn in the spring, the right time for hay fever. Hawthorn and the haws, the berries from the hawthorn. Rose hips, yarrow. You all know the yarrow. Check it out. Get a Google picture. You'll see it. Sage, willow. We've 2,000 different varieties of willow in Ireland. Very good for containing aspirin, salicylic acid, without the acetyl group. The acetyl group is what makes it aspirin. It is salicylic acid, which means it doesn't disturb the stomach and it doesn't cause bleeding. And I say God got there first and she did a good job. So sage, thyme, wild carrot, particularly by the seaside, very nice, makes like a goblet, seed head. Bog bean if you're on a bog, and erythrea if you're halfway up a mountain. And I can show you all of those herbs on a day's walk. They're still there. They've been there for 5,000 years, 10,000 years. They haven't gone away. We have lost our knowledge. We have lost our faith. The knowledge was there. We can now explain the knowledge via pharmacy. I can look at the constituents of any of those plants that have been identified over the last 80 years. And like the willow, I can say, oh, willow has salicylic acid. How clever. How did they know that before they started getting out their chemistry sets? But they did know it. They know it because of the effect, because of the outcomes. So herbs are about outcomes. How do we know that herb worked? Because people feel better. I did my training in herbal medicine with 3 of the top herbalists in the UK who've written books and set up university degrees and all the rest of it. Thanks to Margaret Thatcher, just a quirk in how it all worked out. And I was extremely skeptical, and to my my chagrin, the patients consistently came back and said they were feeling better, which was astonishing to me. I didn't expect it. I wanted something that people would know that I appreciated that they felt well and would be helpful to them while they got better themselves. I thought that would be a brilliant outcome. But lo and behold, they consistently came back. Not everybody, there's limits to everything, but an awful lot of them came back and said they got, so I got more interested and eventually changed my career and gave up my pension. So there you go. And came home. So that was, it all worked out to a very helpful cycle. So I said I like herbs because they're complex, they're nourishing, they're pleiotropic and heterogeneic. Other words for that is they have myriad effects and the constituents in them are very variable. They're very variable from one field to the next, from one year to the next, from one batch to the next. So they're very variable. Does that matter? I don't think so. The pharmacists think that the pharmacy model, not individual pharmacists, the pharmacy model thinks this is a big problem. But we are so complex. We're now realizing that the pharmacy is now evolving to a situation where there are cascades, biochemical cascades, where you might block one thing, but where does it go, right? It goes into network other signals. And we're also realizing in pharmacy the evolutionary model of hormesis, so hormosis. So eventually pharmacy is coming around to the fact that complexity and not knowing specific outcomes is not always a bad thing. Okay, I might know that statins block HMG-CoA enzyme, but if I block something, it's like putting a boulder in the middle of a dam. It has to work its way around. So that's why I think the complexity model is helpful when it comes to herbal medicine. Okay, the other thing about herbal medicine is that it adds flavor and richness. That's why we call it the spice of life. So I was mentioning the turmeric, cinnamon, black pepper, chilies. These are all, we use them in very small amounts, but they have, again, that they're absorbed into the bloodstream, they're absorbed by the lymph system, they're absorbed directly by the cells. They're like a slow release, nature's slow release model. So, and they also have an accumulative effect. So somebody was earlier saying that their mum took the digestive tea and it seemed to help, but she should have got her a year's supply. And she said the whole thing is about consistency. If you're not smacking something down with a sledgehammer, if I want to move a big mountain of earth, I can either get a digger, a big digger, a mini digger, depending on the size of the mountain, or I can get 50 people with reasonably sized buckets and shovels. All right. Either way, the mountain moves. So the outcome is the same, but if you move it slowly and put it carefully where you want to distribute it, so that it's even, and you're likely to have a sustained effect. Okay, because it's more organic. Okay, in a sense of evening out. So it's like a low dip roller coaster as opposed to Alton Towers, or the huge big roller coasters. So in this, the other reason for the flavor and the richness coming back home is if we add sage and thyme to our lamb or our chicken. We kill our chicken on a Tuesday. We've no fridge, okay? And we live halfway up a mountain. And if we get food poisoning and we don't have an ensuite bathroom, you've got the picture. It's a very good incentive for learning that if we wrap our lamb in sage or thyme, we're a lot less likely to be out in a ditch at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay. So that's why we use sage and thyme in stuffing, because they're antimicrobial. We learned that before we could look under microscopes or determine the chemistry. We now know what the antiseptic constituents are, which is very satisfying. I love knowing what the constituents are, but the thyme works well anyway. Thyme is also good for our nervous system. It's good for sustained sleep, which even herbalists sometimes have forgotten about. So herbs can have lots of different effects. So if you need a constituent, if you have high blood pressure and you take rosemary, that will lower your blood pressure. If you have normal blood pressure, the rosemary won't lower your blood pressure because it goes, oh, that's fine. We don't need to do anything here. Yeah. So it adapts to whatever you need. So, however, you might need a nervine relaxing constituent of rosemary. So that's the constituent that'll work in you. And it'll leave your blood pressure alone. Yeah. So other people might need the stimulating effect of rosemary or the alertness. It's not a stimulant. Rosemary is a very nice one if you come in from your lectures in the good old days. You finish your Zoom lectures for the day and you've got to settle down, have your dinner, go for a walk, of course, and settle down and then do your assignments. Rosemary tea is very good then because it helps your alertness and it helps your relaxation. That sounds strange, but because if there's 350 constituents, 4 of them might be for alertness and 3 of them might be for relaxing. It's a kind of like the opposite of, it's not sedating, it's relaxing. And this is what I like about herbs. There's all these nuances. And you fit those nuances to the individual person. That's why some people might take chamomile and they go, it doesn't make any difference to me at all. That's not just suiting them. Other people might have a cup of herb tea, cup of chamomile tea, and it really helps them sleep at night. If you're having difficulty with sleeping, I think you need 3 cups of chamomile tea during the day. And a cup of chamomile tea in the evening is good for everybody. A cup of St. John's wort tea is very good for everybody, especially during the winter. And traditionally, that's how it would be used. But there's a lot of fear mongering about herbs. Herbs are very safe. And if you're not on any medication, work away with your St. John's wort. Okay. Things like parsley are very nourishing. Again, we would have put them in foods, and I'm saying you don't put them. Irish people have a lovely habit of putting them on top of their salad or their sandwich to make them look nice, then putting it on the side of the plate in case anybody would accuse them of eating something green. So parsley is particularly nourishing. Herbs are life enhancing. They're foods, they're medicines, and there's much overlap between food and medicines. So if I want to use herbs for a medicinal effect, I often use them in a higher dose, in a consistent fashion, aimed at specific outcomes. So if somebody has insomnia, I'll be saying, right, let's use chamomile, wild oats, and thyme if it's the winter and they tend to get sinuses as well, and lime flower. because that's very nice and it tastes nice. Taste is very important in the teas. So I might use those 4 herbs, and I would say to use 4 teaspoons a day throughout the day. Okay, so you make a pot of it, drink it, pour it into your sippy cup or your flask or your water cup. You can drink it hot or cold. So they're very practical and very inexpensive, but consistency and persistence is the important thing. I point out that there is no medicine that makes people better. People make themselves better. Herbal medicine provides building blocks, usually nourishing building blocks. Some can also be used for symptom management at the same time, because who wants to feel miserable? But so they're used more consistently and for specific outcomes. Before the 1900 to 1950, there were no medicines that were aimed at particularly disease categories. There were medicines that had particular outcomes, which were useful when people complained of specific ranges of things. But it's not like today, if I go on a radio program, people want to know, what do I take for sinuses? What do I take for headaches? And I go, well, who are you? You know, why is your body telling you this? Herbalists listen a lot more, because what symptoms you have tell a lot about the background physiology and who you are, and what herbs in a blend might be useful together. But there are blends that people would have had stock blends in their houses for their families and in their gardens, and we've lost that. We've lost that knowledge and connection, and we've not only have we lost it, we've devalued it. So herbal medicine doesn't treat a discrete disease named by a medical system that divides us all into the gut system and the respiratory system and the urinary system, which is a very odd way to organize medicine. Okay, that organization has developed because that's how the medical profession needed to earn a living. Okay, some people needed to denote that they had a particular interest or specialization. And that's only been in the last 150 years. Before that, it was organized according to how the body was expressing itself, okay, and letting us know that we were not in balance, right? So herbal medicine is aimed at what's called in medicine homeostasis, but I actually refer to it as homeodynamics, because nothing stays the same. Okay, so you're trying to influence the homeodynamics to steer it back to a comfort balance. So your symptoms are your clues. They're your uh-oh. So that's the approach. The other thing I like about herbal medicine, and we're into your sustainability here, is that they're not artificial chemicals. If I take paracetamol, up until 1870, and then moving into the then it was dropped, and then moving into the 1900s, paracetamol didn't exist on the planet. It's a synthetic single molecule, and it's not part of the natural environment. The same with antibiotics. Antibiotics, the natural penicillin was part of fungal molds, but it didn't exist as a single factory constituent, single constituent of that mold. Do you see what I mean? When we get into things like biologics and again, I'm not, don't get me wrong, these can be very useful. This isn't anti-pharma, it's just explaining that there's a valuable role for each. But it's a crucial fundamental difference that herbal medicine uses constituents that are in nature. They are co-evolved, We stopped making some of these things because we knew where to get them from plants. Okay, so in order for us to develop on two legs and have a head and a brain, whatever use that is to us, which is what all the big questions are about, okay, we had to stop making other things because it would have been too complex. So we left it to the plant kingdom, and we distributed their seeds for them, and they gave us medicines, right? Very generous. I believe in an abundant universe. Okay, we just need to tune into it. And herbal medicine is part of an abundant universe, that we've forgotten the language and its role. So in that sense, it's an ecological solution, and it's sustainable and regenerative. What's often forgotten is that when we take drugs, antidepressants, anxiolytics, I had a patient yesterday who was on 2 antidepressants, a sleeping tablet, a dementia tablet, a protein pump digestive tablet, a statin for cholesterol. There was more than that. I don't know how the woman gets off the couch, right? All of them are justifiable, but that's very extreme, all right? Well, I wish it was extreme. 25% of our over 75s are on 5 drugs or more. So it's not, you know, it's not that percentage are on 10 drugs or more, which is what she's on. She's also on an antipsychotic. But a sizable proportion of people are on 10, over 80s are on these. So this is your future, guys. So when we put those tablets in our mouths and swallow them, and they metabolized through the liver, or the safety toxicology of the liver, they're designed to get past all of those. They go into the bloodstream and they're eliminated either via the liver or the kidneys or the sweat or whatever. But then they go where? There's no special filter anywhere, including in our hospitals, which are using the most reserved antibiotics as necessary. As I say, this is when these things are necessary. I prescribe them and I believe in them. Of course I believe in them. But they're eliminated into where? Okay, so I'm sure some of the other speakers this week are saying where. They're going into the rivers and the streams and the land. We're so fortunate in Ireland. You know, we have a lot of good food in Ireland, and there's food deserts out there. We should be so appreciative. So the drug metabolites are excreted out into the environment. So we should be using these drugs very sparingly, but they are the only model of medicine. So they're everywhere. Like we can't complain of anything, but we're given a drug because that's what the doctors study. That's what the pharmacists know. And we have a choice. Mine is all a good news message. The world is abundant and we have good, safe medicines, and there is a very positive role for them in the midst of other heterogeneous medicines, including acupuncture, physiotherapy, like lots of different models. It's not that, oh, herbal medicine will save the world, but it has a very, very useful role in our homes. So I really would campaign for filtrating the waste water from hospitals. I think that's a very urgent sustainability regeneration issue. Coming on to the dreaded COVID, I'm getting phone calls all over the place about the COVID vaccine, which I'm not going to talk about. But I will say that concentrating all of our eggs in one basket of vaccination, to me, isn't sensible or sustainable, because it will change, hybridize. Well, I can't think of the word. It will mutate into different hybrids and whatever, and how often we need vaccines, and what about the next pandemic? Remember, guys, this is the second pandemic of my lifetime. I lived through the HIV pandemic, which was devastating. absolutely devastating, you know, to the communities particularly involved. And I knew many of them and went to many funeral of young people at the height of their, you know, kind of wonderful lives, some of whom I still miss to this day. But even the issue then is very small, tight communities, the 56% and rising, living in urban environments where we are disenfranchised from greenery and earth and some of this we do, it's our own responsibility to go and find it. This isn't done to us. This is what we need to do to go and change this. With frequent, often unnecessary travel, which we're all realizing, that unless we have a stewardship of the land and produce, and support a rural economy so that people don't need to move, they have a crop which will be viable on small farms in the west of Ireland. Again, this is about a solution which is topical, but I'm also talking about vast areas of Middle America where there are food deserts, and there is so much to be gained and relearned. So in terms of biodiversity, herbal medicine can be grown on bogs, in sandy soils, on clay soils, up mountains, the edges of forests for forest greenery. So there's biodiversity, sustainability, regenerative medicine. There you go. Get your herbs. So I would describe 4 levels of being involved with herbs. First of all, including them in your diet. And that's the garlic, the parsley, the spices, rosehip tea, and go and harvest them, foraging. The nettles are coming up, the gallium, it's all beginning to regenerate now. Watch my website, Facebook. I do little mini clips so that I'll talk about all these different things and show them to you throughout the year. So food, then first aid. People often phone me and say, what can I do? So-and-so's got digestive upset, or they've cut themselves, or they've injured their ribs or whatever. So a first aid kit containing slippery elm, digestive tea, echinacea, healing balm, comfrey balm, marigold balm. Our very own Annie makes the balms for us, and from local ingredients. We like to support local as much as possible, eat local as much as possible, grow things in your own back garden, on your porches, whatever. So a first aid, there's a free herbal medicine introductory course on my website. So you can kind of get to the feel of what might be useful for blends for you. My cupboard behind me is full of the mucotone for chest, imitone for immune system, slippery elm for thorns from gardening. So everybody has their own go-to for what commonly happens in their households. And then there's the first response, which is more of a working knowledge. That's more the introductory course and knowing how to approach it. But if you're not sure, what's really left out of the picture is that there are professional medical herbalists who do professional and degree courses in herbal medicine. My vision is that every town the size of Arklow would have 4 herbalists. Galway would have 25 herbalists. That people would regularly go out on foraging, learning about their environment, but that professional herbal medicine is available to support. I call seeing a professional herbalist a truly doctoring experience, as in terms of docere is to teach, where you learn a diploma in your own health. Okay, how often do people do their NCT because they have to, right? But they never think of going to a herbalist for learning about their own constitution. Herbal medicine is based on constitutions. a simple way of understanding constitution is to think of all of the archetypal characters like Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is so laid back, just feed him the honey. Piglet is running around in circles going, what if, what if, what if? Tiggy is jumping up and down going, I'm so excited about it all. Owl is saying, now, wait a minute, we've learned all this in the past. He's the historian, but no real heart, while Rue is mothering everybody. So these are the constitutions, a bit like the Enneagram people might have heard of. The Enneagram is a bit of the dark side, our worst side, and then learn how to make it better. Okay, sorry, I can't put him upstairs because of the buildings. Then we come to the whole thing of accountability. There's no, if you look at the industrialized world, you can't compare pharmaceutical medicine with non-pharmaceutical medicine. I've done this with Albania because I'm writing a book about this. And Albania has not invested in pharmaceutical medicine. It has kept out the outside world. It has, in terms of long-term health outcomes, it actually compares very well in terms of increasing the duration of life and parameters. The industrialized societies are becoming awash with chronic illnesses. People in Bailey are living the same length of time, but we're suffering from our 60s onwards, all right? So you create your own avatar. You create your own avatar as to how your life is going to go in the future. And you think to yourself, you know, I think I'll find out a bit more about this herbal medicine because I want to stay well, all right? I know that's very hard to imagine when you're 22, but it will happen. And then people ask me about evidence-based medicine. Now, I love evidence-based medicine. In fact, I was a poster doctor GP for evidence-based medicine. But there are huge issues kind of within. What's been lost from evidence-based medicine is that it should be reasonable evidence and it should be in tune with the patient's values. Okay, and that has been lost sight of. The evidence is certainly there. I can look at a piece of evidence and look at the herbs that they're looking at. And before I even read the paper, I can tell you whether this is going to be a help or not a help, or whether the research has been constructed, you know, in a way that's not going to be useful. And one reason for that is that the research has not been done by clinical medical herbalists. Very little of the research in medicine is done by GPs. Similarly, and even more so, very little of the research budget goes to, I can tell you that I can't find more recent numbers to hand, but I've no reason to think it's changed. But in the year 2000, 1/200th of the research budget was given to all CAM, which is complementary and alternative medicine practices. 1/200th between, that's osteopathy, chiropractic, homeopathy, magnets, prayer, contemplation, everything, you know, which are all great. It's about finding what's good for you. But the evidence base of all of them is very different. The evidence base for herbal medicine is, if you take it from life sciences upwards, is almost all positive, and the vast majority of it is in keeping with traditional use. So in other words, like the willow contains salicylic acid and is known to be anti-inflammatory, pain relieving, whatever. And the acetyl part of it didn't particularly add to its safety, for sure. They also realized when they look at the amount of salicylic acid, the amount of salicylic acid in it doesn't explain all of its pharmaceutical properties. So it's the whole herb. This is what drives them crazy. It's the whole herb. It's not the salicylic acid. And that's been proven over and over again. And I'll give you another example, which is St. John's wort. There was when I started out in herbal medicine in 2000, in 2000, I set up the clinic in 1999. There was this huge banning of St. John's wort in ginkgo because it interacts with drugs. That means that we're defining the normal population as being on pharmaceuticals. All right, which I mean, to me, that was just always problematic. It emerges, and it has been documented for several years, for 4 years now. It is only the commercial products that exaggerated one of the constituents called hyperforin, which it is the exaggerated hyperforin level that interacts with the drugs. So in other words, if you take a crude herb in the amount that medical herbalists have been using for centuries, whether that's a tea, a tincture, a whole herb, powdered herb in a capsule, all of those will be under 1 milligram per day of hyperforin. And it's only above that level that you'll get drug interactions. Now, we had huge media coverage about St. John's wort and drug interactions. Have any of you heard that this, oops, it's still on the, not available to consumers in Evergreen or any of our health food shops or even pharmacies. It's been shown to be effective for mild to moderate depression. It can be prescribed by GPs, but GPs don't learn about it. And they feel very unsure about prescribing it because there is a fear factor. And interestingly, this has come up with 2 herbs, St. John's wort and cava, both of which have the most evidence base for stress and depression. Both of them have had this big fear factor built in. Both of them, the problem is the commercialization and standardization. What the pharmacists are most comfortable with is what's causing the problems. So that's why my kind of, to do with sustainability, regeneration, I think the 5,000 years of people who went before me were very wise. They knew this stuff from the ground up, from generations of learning, observation, in a way that we just don't do anymore. We learn from books now. And training to be professional medical herbalist is about, yes, learning all of the books that the knowledge that can be transferred, but it's actually transformational. And a system of learning that has got to do with apprenticeship and has got to do with a medicine of stewardship rather than high impact. Okay. So am I talking about back to the land, living the dream, biodiversity, where there's muck, there's magic? Yes. That's not going to work. Most of us will still live in cities, but we can support a medicine and we can use a medicine and we can go and grow the medicine, harvest it, learn more about the science of it, but in a positive direction, not in a fearful, discouraging direction, which is what I observe. I love the metaphysical aspect, the spiritual connection. Herbs bring us in touch with the cycles of life, cycles of renewal. They're very grounding, given that we live in an era of electrical circuitry. I don't know what 5G or whatever impact it's going to have. The interesting thing is neither has anybody else. They say it's safe, but we won't know that for 25 years, 50 years. One of the things that I will say is that it's important to get out and see the horizon, look at the ground, look at the sky through the trees. And this is specific for screen living, because it exercises the accommodation in our eyes. Okay, can you see that? If we're looking at things screen size, we need the expansive view. From a spiritual, our eyes are our window to the universe. This is metaphysical as well as just exercising the lens. Those muscles need to be exercised as well. Okay. And the other thing is, if we're growing things in the ground, we're getting real exercise. I'm a great believer in real exercise. It's nice. We're producing. It's productive, and they don't call fruit and vegetables produce for nothing. How wonderful it is I'm about to go and harvest my 3 spears of broccoli on my patio upstairs. Okay. So specifically for students at the moment, and for all of us living in these times, for mental aggravation, herbs like lemon balm, valerian. The valerian is growing all up along Dangan, beyond the playing fields at the university. Chamomile, lime flower, you'll find those in Dangan Woods as you go up towards the garden centre. You'll find them at a level where you can actually pick them. They're trees, lime flower trees. And the bracts will be coming out soon, and can be harvested. Thyme, very good for any sinusy, mucusy, keeping things at bay, and wild oats. Students love wild oats because that's what you should all be doing, and instead you're at home with your screens. But wild oats are very good for stamina, and it comes from the expression to sow your wild oats, have a good time, party on, right? But there'll be time for that, don't worry. Age-related issues for your demographic is things like irritable bowel syndrome, premenstrual syndrome, menstrual irregularities, including heavy periods. Lots of young women are on the pill. They don't need it for contraception. It's a sledgehammer, and a lot of the time they would respond very nicely to herbal medicines. With what's all other methods of healing, including pharmacy, and in conjunction with people's medical doctors. Can you hear with that? Yeah. I could try going into another room, but we had a very poor Zoom connection. Herbs provide building blocks. They may also suppress some symptoms. But it's in a balance with the healing, whereas drugs always suppress. They can be healing because they can provide a window of time with suppression of symptoms that you can start to heal. Preferably, introduce herbs for mild and persistent but aggravating problems. Moderate problems, don't wait until you're depleted. Yeah, severe problems are bound to take longer. Shush. I'm going to go to the next room and see if you have any questions, guys.